Wasabi guys, I'm just gonna come back again with some more Hour of Devastation spoilers. This time we have a whole bunch. So we got here a 2 mana artifact, Crook of Condemnation. This looks like a significantly worse Relic of Progenitus, and it is an uncommon, so that means that it's not gonna be a popper playable card. Who knows, I don't think this is gonna see any play at all. We have solemnity, which is kind of hard for me to say for some reason. You don't really see that word that often. Basically, it's a hate card against counters or anything having to do with counters. So having this type of card, very useful, especially if you're playing that type of deck where you try to equalize and you try to disrupt other people's strategies. It's definitely one of those cards that I like seeing. It doesn't absolutely destroy other people's decks, but it can host certain cards, and I like cards that do that while not being completely oppressive, so it's definitely a card I'm interested in seeing how it plays. Then we have Swarm Intelligence, 7 mana enchantment that basically says whenever you play a spell, you can copy it and you can choose new targets. That is really cool. We have all these instants and sorcery based deck, obviously going to see the majority of its play in Commander, so we know what we're going to get with it. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, but it's interesting. We have Hostile Desert, which has an activated ability of 2. You get to exile a land card from your graveyard, and it becomes a 4/3 until end of turn. Not really that great. We have better man lands. Yeah, it's cheaper, but you have to have a land card in your graveyard in order to activate it. So it's very, very narrow to that extent, and it's a colorless land. So maybe if there's some sort of desert-based strategy where this is useful, I could maybe see it having play, but it's just a 4/3. It doesn't have any other abilities, so I don't think it's going to see that much play at all. Driven to Despair. It's one of those split cards. Driven basically says until end of turn, creatures you control gain trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Despair is pretty much the same mana cost, but just black. It's a sorcery. Aftermath. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain menace, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. Interesting. I think it's not too terribly bad, but then again, it is 4 mana. I think it could see some play, but not much at all. More of like a limited card. Then we have Unesh, Cryo Sphinx Sovereign. Sphinx spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. So I am ecstatic about this because this likely means that they're not going to try to push this type of strategy, or they're not going to try to push this tribal deck in Commander 2017. So that's definitely a bonus that we don't have shitty Sphinx tribal pre-constructed decks coming this year. So that's a bonus. Other than that, though, I really like its design. I think it's interesting. The fact that it's mono blue it makes sense. The majority of Sphinxes we have are mono blue. And whenever Unesh Cryo Sphinx Sovereign or another Sphinx enters the battlefield under your control, reveal the top 4 cards of your library, and opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put 1 pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. So right off the bat, Sphinx of Uthun does a very similar thing. It's 5 cards instead, but this is like a fact or fiction, but for 4 cards instead of 5. So it's a little bit worse, but it's definitely worth it. I think this is going to be pretty fun to play with. It makes Sphinx Tribal playable. The fact that they cost 2 less to cast is very important, and obviously in blue you can play control, you can play draw, you have that benefit, so it's actually looking like it might actually be a thing that you can do. So I'm excited to see what people do with that. I'm personally not going to play it because I think Wizard Tribal and Mono Blue is way better and way more entertaining to watch, but who knows. Then we have Angel of Condemnation. She has 2 activated abilities. She's flying and vigilant, so you obviously can determine when you want to attack first and then use the activated abilities. Her first one is Exile. It's 3 mana, tap to exile another target creature, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Her other ability is, same thing, tap, exert, Angel of Condemnation, exile another target creature until Angel of Condemnation leaves the battlefield. Very interesting, I love it. I think exiling removal is always the best removal you can have in Standard, and to do it this easy, yeah, you're exerting it, but who really cares? Then we have Hour of Glory, which is a 4 mana black spell instant. Exile target creature. If that's a god, its controller reveals its hand, and then they exile all cards with the same name as that creature. Very much like Deicide from Theros. The only downside being it's 3 mana. This is 4 mana. Instant speed. A little bit better, but other than that, I don't think this is going to see too much play. It might see play as like a 2-of, but it's mono black. I think it's flexible enough to where it's going to see play, but how much, that's to be determined. Then we have two of the cards from the Planeswalker decks, Visage of Bolas and Nissa's Encouragement, both of which are very narrow and specific towards the Planeswalkers from those decks, both the Nissa, Genesis Mage, and Nicol Bolas from those decks. Then we have another split card here. We have Reason to Live. First part, Reason, is 1 blue, Scry 3, and the Aftermath, which is Live, is 5 mana, green, and look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you may reveal it and put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, just put it in your hand. It's good manipulation, so total you're going to pay 6 mana to cheat a creature into play. Hopefully it's something worthwhile, but 6 mana just to cheat, I don't think that's that big of a deal, and I don't know if it's going to see much play at all. Then we have Djeru the Purified. So if you've been reading the lore, you know he's a pretty significant character. He is 5 mana, mono white. He's a legendary creature, but when he ETBs, you may search your library for a Planeswalker card and put it into your hand and then shuffle your library. If a source would deal damage to a Planeswalker you control, prevent 1 of that damage. So right off the bat, automatic comparison is Call of the Gatewatch, which is a 3 mana sorcery that basically just tutors up a Planeswalker with no other benefit. The benefit here is that you can just throw this into a Super Friends deck, maybe a Traxa, search up a Planeswalker, and you have some defense for Planeswalkers there. It is a creature with vigilance, so it has that benefit, but I'm still skeptical. I think, honestly, like Call the Gatewatch, it is a 3 mana sorcery. You don't have to worry about spending more mana, but you get a body here, so I think Djeru is definitely a consideration for Super Friends decks, and especially Traxa. Then we have the Scarab God, probably the most noteworthy spoiler here. He is 5 mana, Dimir colors for at the beginning of your upkeep. Each opponent loses X life and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. And he's an activated ability of 4 mana, 2 generic and 2 Dimir for exile target creature card from a graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. And it has the same thing as the other two. When it dies, return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. That is pretty good. I mean, I like it. I think it's a good addition for zombie-based decks, and it's in the right color, so it makes sense. The only downside is that he's not a zombie god. That would have been a lot more funny. But I think they're all just plain gods. They're not anything else. They're just god creatures. I mean, this is definitely interesting. I think zombie decks will love this. It gives you a win con here, and I think it's going to see play in standard if you splash blue into black-white zombies, and I think that's definitely worth it. So anyway, guys, let me know what you think about these spoilers. I am pumped up for this set. It looks very good. It has a lot of good cards in here. I definitely think it's going to be an improvement on Amonkhet. So that's going to do it for me. I'm signing off. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Check out my other videos. I'm signing off. Thanks for watching. Void Mage Gamer.